All right, good evening. Welcome to Compound Interesting. In today's video, we're going to have a look at Michael Saylor and his company Microstrategy, who've put an enormous amount of their money and his own personal money into Bitcoin, why that is, and whether or not you should be interested in investing in the company Microstrategy. His explanations of Bitcoin really resonated with me because he's an engineer and he's been a public company CEO for the last 25 years with Microstrategy. That is not an easy feat. It is one thing to become a billionaire, it is another thing to be able to stay at the top of your league for decades, like he has done. So he sells business intelligence software through MicroStrategy since before the dot-com bubble, and is still going with that company now. That is an extraordinary feat in itself. Not only that, he's also written a book called The Mobile Wave, in which he predicted back 10-12 years ago that Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple would completely take over the world, and this was when those companies were just kind of starting to take off. So basically in that book he says, buy Amazon, buy Google, buy Facebook stock, buy Apple stock, and look how that would have turned out for you now. They're all 10 baggers since then, at least, if not more. So he put about $50 million into those companies and turned it into $500 million. Now he thinks, with the same analogies and the same reasoning, he believes Bitcoin, he's putting all his money into Bitcoin, just Bitcoin, nothing else, no stocks. Everything he owns is going into Bitcoin. Everything his company owns is going into Bitcoin. And he explains it in the most engaging way possible. And like I was saying, I studied physics. If you didn't know, I studied physics. He was an engineer at MIT, an extraordinarily smart guy. So way, like I mentioned, to become a public CEO and at the age of like 25, I think. So really young CEO, and being able to stay at the top for so long, obviously an absolute genius. So the fact that he was an engineer at MIT and the way he explains Bitcoin really resonated with me, and that's why I decided to put my very last bit of savings, a few €1,000, into Bitcoin a few months ago when it was still 20 grand, even though it had gone on a crazy run. Everyone's like, oh, it's at all-time highs, it's got to crash. But I was like, Bitcoin still has a long way to go, and I still believe Bitcoin has a long way to go. So we're going to go through everything Michael Saylor and Microstrategy, kind of a similar name there. Maybe that's not a coincidence. But anyway, I think I am probably one of the best people to be able to talk about Michael Saylor and Microstrategy on YouTube, because as you're probably aware, I talk about both stocks and cryptocurrency, so mostly Bitcoin and stocks. So obviously the Bitcoin videos, well, not obviously, but the Bitcoin videos generally don't tend to do as well as the stock market videos, but I like to be that in between, that linking force between stock market investors and cryptocurrency investors, because I'm both, and I kind of want to show cryptocurrency investors the light of the stock market and vice versa. So I like to be that link, and I have watched every single Michael Saylor interview for the last year that he's come out and been speaking about Bitcoin. He's been in so many interviews, so I've literally lapped up everything he's had to say on Bitcoin, and I've internalized everything he said about Bitcoin to the best of my ability. So I'm going to play a clip for you now, his thoughts on Bitcoin, and then we're going to get into MicroStrategy and whether MicroStrategy would be a better investment than going out and buying Bitcoin itself for you. So this is probably the best clip that summarizes his thoughts on Bitcoin in the shortest amount of time. But yeah, there's more to be said, but I think this clip really illuminates the main reason that he's put all his money and going, actually more than all his money, he's going on leverage to buy Bitcoin, in the fact that he's taken on debt through MicroStrategy to buy Bitcoin. So yeah, so he's really going. So yeah, he obviously really believes in Bitcoin. So let's let the man speak for himself.
It's a savings and loan in cyberspace that's available to 7.8 billion people, where no politician can steal your money, right? That's a simple idea. Everybody on earth needs it. Simple. There's another idea though, which is this is the first truly engineered monetary network in the history of the world. And by that, I mean, it's a closed, thermodynamically sound monetary system. If you put $100 million in the system, it's like charging a battery. It has no power loss. You can store it for 100 years. It'll still be there. Every other monetary system has a power loss in it. It bleeds energy. if you put your money into, if you put your money into electricity and store it in a battery, you lose 2% a month. You have 24% inflation rate a year. If you put your money, that's the problem. You can't move electricity around without losing 6% of it over the course of a few hundred miles. So what if I wanted to store all my monetary energy and I didn't want to lose it every month or every year or every decade? Well, I design a closed system, 21 million gold coins. None come in, none go out. All I can do is heat it up or cool it down. That's the definition of a thermodynamic closed system. Bitcoin is the first example of that system. What that means is that you can collect all of the monetary energy in the world, store it in this battery, hold it for 100 years, channel it through time and space with no energy loss. It's an engineering breakthrough. It's like an aqueduct. It's like an electrical power system or grid. So if I said to you, I thought I'd build a city, but I thought I'd plug it into an aqueduct, you wouldn't say I'm crazy. You would say that's a good idea so that all your people don't die due to lack of water and sanitation, right? No one's ever figured it out. Bitcoin is Facebook for money. If Facebook's worth $1 trillion because it stores the social energy of 1 billion people or 2 billion, Bitcoin has got to be worth 100x that much because it's storing the money of 1 billion people. When Rupert Murdoch shows up to Facebook, he doesn't bring 1 billion friends. When Rupert Murdoch shows up to Bitcoin, he's going to drop $1 billion on the network immediately, because what do you do with a monetary network other than put all your money on it? It's a pretty big idea. It's not a speculative, uncorrelated asset. It's the first monetary network in the history of the world that we figured out how to make work. I posted this on Twitter, I pointed out Square's moved. Because Square moved, PayPal's got to adopt it. Otherwise, everybody shifts their accounts to Square. I mean, who wants a savings account that yields nothing when they could get 100%? So Square pushed PayPal. Square and PayPal are going to force Apple to move. And if Apple were to build a crypto wallet into the secure element of the iPhone and really support it with integration to Apple Pay in a nice native fashion, and if they were to then adopt Bitcoin on their balance sheet and start to buy some Bitcoin, they would generate $100 billion in shareholder value in 12 months. I mean, you want to make $100 billion? It's a very simple thing. Build it into 1 billion phones and then buy a few billion worth of it. What do you think happens to Bitcoin? If Apple buys $10 billion of Bitcoin, what do you think happens to the Bitcoin price? I mean, there's so many ways to make money, right? Because if Apple did it, everybody else would have to do it too, right? And 1 billion people will be using the iPhone. If I use my iPhone as my hardware wallet, if it's the go-to hardware wallet for moving Bitcoin around, then you're going to pry it from my cold dead fingers. I mean, Square's done a great job. They basically plug Bitcoin into Square, and PayPal's plugged Bitcoin into PayPal. Once you've made that commitment, they're going to pry it from your fingers, white knuckle. No one's going to let go, because who wants to give up their money? It's one thing, think about how loyal we are to Apple because we got our photos on it, or our messages on it, or our movies on it. What are you more loyal to? All the money you own or your photos? The next mobile wave is money, all of it, hundreds of trillions of dollars of it. Imagine what happens if all that money leaps off of stocks, bonds, real estate, gold, silver, and derivatives, and it flows into people's mobile devices where they can control it. And imagine if you didn't have to worry about juggling it and guessing whose stock is going up and whose stock is going down. Right? I mean, the beauty of Bitcoin is it's simple. It's like you put your money in the bank and no one steals it. That's it. Okay, well, how good is that idea? Well, the central bank is going to steal 15% of it if you hold it in dollars. And and by the way, that's the best case, because if you have money in Venezuelan currency, Lebanese currency, Nigerian currency, Argentinian currency, you're losing more. right? You're going to lose 90% of all your money if you have another currency. You're just going to lose half your money in the next 36 months if you have it in the US or Europe. So here's my big idea for you. What if someone was not going to steal your money? And what if we built that into big tech? So it's right here. That's the excitement. What did MicroStrategy do? Well, first we bought some, and then we offered to buy out all of our shareholders that didn't like the idea. So then we bought out some of them, and we took the excess in a tender offer. And then we bought some more. And then it went up, and then we made like $300 million on it. So then it almost doubled, and then we bought some more. And then now we have like 800 million or 850 million, something like that worth of it. And then we went to the marketplace. So we raised a convertible debt offering last week. We raised $650 million to buy some more. We wanted to borrow in a currency which is debasing in value and invest in something which is appreciating in value. Because isn't that what you're supposed to do in business?
So I hope you're kind of getting a sense for why Michael Saylor wanted to invest in Bitcoin. He had this enormous cash pile that he was sitting on, like $500 million with MicroStrategy. So he could have invested it in bonds. He could have invested it by buying back shares. He could have issued dividends to increase his stock price. All these different options. But to him, or just kept it in cash. But to him, the only investment or the only thing he could do with that money without that money leaking value. So he kind of uses these analogies. So anything that leaks, like bonds leak, fiat currencies leak in the fact that there's inflation. So your value here is continually leaking 1% per year, or real estate leaks in 1% per year in property taxes. Gold, investing in gold leaks because gold's inflation rate is 1 or 2%. And to him, and what made a lot of sense to me, it's the only monetary technology that doesn't leak anything. There's 21 million Bitcoin, and there can never be any more Bitcoin ever created, no matter what you try to do. So if you buy 1 million Bitcoin or 70,000 Bitcoin like he has bought, you're still going to have 70,000 Bitcoin in 100 years. And that's the unique selling point for Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is the best way to store monetary energy and transfer it over space and time. So what that means is, okay, fiat currencies like your dollars or your euros, they're great for sending money across space. So I can send dollars across to Russia pretty easily and for low fees by just like sending a bank transfer or something. So I can send it across space, but the fact that I can't really send it across time. So I can't send $1 million to my daughter 10 years from now, who isn't even born yet. I can't send her $1 million, so I can't just keep $1 million and send it to her in 10 years' time, because that $1 million will have lost probably half its value in 10 years, if not more. So that clip was created by Informed View, a YouTube site, and it was an interview with Michael Saylor talking to Gally from Hyperchange, one of my favorite channels if you want to check it out. I'm also going to leave in the description a couple of my favorite interviews and the best interviews, in my opinion, with Michael Saylor. There's hundreds of them, and I think these two I'll link to in the description. They're the best interviews if you're interested in learning more about the way Michael Saylor thinks and why he's gone into leverage to buy a stupid amount of Bitcoin. So now MicroStrategy owns 70,000 Bitcoin. So they started out, they had bought, I think, like 200 million worth of Bitcoin with their cash reserves. Then they'd released their bought another 200 million. Let me see the actual numbers here. So right now they have 70,000, just over 70,000 Bitcoin with an average purchase price of $16,000. Now you saw Bitcoin almost hit, well, it was actually over $40,000 recently. It's had a bit of a pullback to 30,000, but still they've turned $1.125 billion into $2.5 billion in a matter of months. So what took Michael Saylor 20 years to make, it took him 20 years to make $500 million. He's quadrupled that in a matter of less than a year. So pretty sensational stuff by just investing in Bitcoin. not like it's so much harder to create $1 billion company and provide business intelligence solutions, what MicroStrategy does, and be better than all the competition out there and be constantly innovating and improving your products for your customers over 25 years. So he's earned 25 years times 4 in the last year. To add to that, so the reason MicroStrategy, if you noticed, MicroStrategy stock has kind of been a little bit more volatile than Bitcoin. So it kind of goes up even more than Bitcoin does when Bitcoin's going up, and goes down more than Bitcoin does when Bitcoin goes down. So it's kind of like a multiplication of Bitcoin's price. And the reason is because they took out a 650 million convertible debt loan. So they've basically taken on debt and have bought more Bitcoin with that debt. So it's kind of a leverage of Bitcoin when you're buying into MicroStrategy. So now their Bitcoin holdings are worth 2.5 billion and their market cap is worth about 5 billion. So you're paying a premium of about 100% on the actual Bitcoin that MicroStrategy have, because their market cap is double what the amount of Bitcoin that they have is worth. So why would you be interested in doing that at all? Well, let's take into effect that they also have a profitable business that nets them about $40 million every year in profits, but makes about $500 million in revenue, although it doesn't really have much growth going for it. However, we could take into effect that their costs have dropped dramatically since the Rona. So they used to have enormous sales and marketing expenses because they would have these enormous press conferences in person, and obviously press conferences can't do that anymore. And now they're going to probably not spend they spent crazy amounts on sales and marketing. But now, because of Michael Saylor, he's been on the news multiple times. Everyone knows, well, not everyone, but a lot of people have heard, way more people have heard of MicroStrategy now than at any time before in its entire history because of this Bitcoin purchase. So this Bitcoin purchase has been the best marketing that they could ever get for their business. So they don't need to do sales and marketing again. And also their costs are reduced in the fact that a lot of their staff are working from home, and all the efficiencies that have been improved because of the Rona or whatever you want to call it. So you're buying into a company that has its entire treasury reserve assets, so its entire balance sheet in Bitcoin, and it's netting, let's say, $50 million, but that could be a lot more now. So instead of, I think their profits could easily double to $100 million per year. So you're netting $100 million of Bitcoin. So you're buying this much Bitcoin that's also accumulating an extra $100 million of Bitcoin every single year for you. The other nice thing about MicroStrategy is that it's kind of a Bitcoin ETF without being a Bitcoin ETF. So there is no Bitcoin ETF that has been approved in the United States yet. So anyone who wants to invest in Bitcoin through an IRA or through an investment firm, it's kind of difficult to do that. But investing in MicroStrategy offers a nice alternative to anyone who wants to get into Bitcoin but can't actually physically go out and buy the Bitcoin themselves. So they can just go and buy MicroStrategy stock instead as a way to have some exposure to Bitcoin. So is Michael Saylor ever going to sell his Bitcoin, and will MicroStrategy ever cash out? In my humble opinion, I say absolutely not a chance. If you listen to Michael Saylor at all, he's always talking about holding his wealth for the next 100 years. So I don't think in the next decade or two, they're going to sell any meaningful part of their Bitcoin. So let's say Michael Saylor believes in the long term that Bitcoin's going to go to $15 million in the very, very long term. I've given my own price targets of the very, very long term maximum amount that Bitcoin's price could reach of about $5 million. However, that's not going to happen next year or the next 5 years. These are the decades out price targets if Bitcoin really sucks up every single way people store value. So people currently store value in bonds. Bonds have gone to absolute crap because pretty much every bond in the entire world, unless it's a complete junk bond, is losing value over time. So you're basically giving people money to store for you and then getting less value in return. So absolutely no points investing in bonds. And even now they have negative yielding bonds, which means not only do you get less in value, you get less in actual monetary number amount. So I give you $1,000. So I give you $1,000 and in 10 years time you give me $900 back, and that $900 is now worth $500 or something. So obviously it makes very little sense to be storing your value in bonds right now. Also, a lot of people store their value in real estate. Also, a lot of people store their value in cash. Also, a lot of people store their value in gold, etc., etc. He believes all of this store value is going to accumulate into Bitcoin, and that's where he gets the $15 million price target. But let's be reasonable and say Bitcoin gets to a price target of $1 million within 10 to 15 years. That would make Michael Saylor, that would make the 70,000 Bitcoin that they own be worth $70 billion, let alone the Bitcoin that Michael Saylor owns personally himself. So Michael Saylor would definitely be one of the richest people in the entire world. So have I purchased MicroStrategy stock? I was never really interested in purchasing any MicroStrategy stock. I've just been buying Bitcoin for the last year, well, for the last 4 years or so. And I've been telling you to buy Bitcoin for the last 6 months repeatedly, like since 10,000, 20,000. Even now at $30,000, I still think it's a great investment, probably the best investment risk to reward in the entire stock market or any cross asset space. From what I know right now for the next year, I think it's going to go from 30,000 to at least 100,000, but much more likely to higher prices than 100,000. In my own personal opinion, not financial advice, of course, do your own research. And great research would be to look at those interviews with Michael Saylor. Really interesting if you're at all kind of mathematically or left or right brained like myself, rational and logic thinking, kind of engineering style thinking. If you're interested in that style of thinking, check out Michael Saylor's interviews. But I did purchase a tiny bit of MicroStrategy stock, and if Bitcoin keeps going down, MicroStrategy stock should fall a little bit further, so it might be a better investment opportunity to actually buy the MicroStrategy stock instead of the actual Bitcoin. And I like the way that they're going to continue buying more and more Bitcoin with the profits that they're making from their actual underlying business. So we'll see how that plans out in the future. So MicroStrategy stock might be an excellent option for you if you're trying to invest in an IRA tax-free account where you can't actually physically go and buy real Bitcoin. You might just buy in the MicroStrategy stock, or it might be a good option for you if you're not bothered setting up a Coinbase account, which takes half an hour. It's a bit of a pain in the neck because you have to do the whole know your customer, give a picture of your passport and stuff like that. So a little bit of an effort. So if you're not bothered, you just want a little bit of exposure to Bitcoin, MicroStrategy stock could be a good investment for you. So that's all I want to say on Michael Saylor, the gigachad of the 2020s. We'll see if he turns out to be right, like he was in 2010 when he predicted the mobile wave completely taking over the world, which he was completely right about. And I hope he is, so Bitcoin goes to moon. All right, I'll leave you with that. Thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Cheers.